Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Frances Lochrane. I'm Interim Chair of RDA UK. I'm Chair of the South Region and Chair of the regional chairs, of which there are 18 regions in the country. I'm also Chair of Lambourne RDA, and I've been involved with Lambourne RDA since about 1997, and I took over as Chair in 2016. I'd like to introduce Rachel Medill, who has been nominated to take over as Chair of RDA UK, and she comes with a very impressive CV and a background in business in the city. And I'm going to hand over to Rachel to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Frances. I'm absolutely delighted to be doing this. I'm very excited about the opportunity to become Chair of RDA. And I thought I'd just give you a little snapshot, because although Frances says, referred to my career in the city, really my story starts almost on a pony. I think I was put on a pony when I was 3 years old. And I was absolutely passionate about it. And I went all the way through Pony Club. And I ended up sort of being so crazy about it that my mother supported me endlessly, even though we really didn't have enough money for me to be riding. I ended up being an eventer through the Pony Club, and then was shortlisted for British Juniors and then British Young Riders. And it's such a long time ago, but it was very, very exciting. And I had a horse called Cresta Run that I backed. She was a little fiery chestnut. She was only 15.2 at the Wither, but she and I went all the way to Badminton. And then I had another horse that was given to me because they couldn't keep it sound, called Border Lord. And he was my heart horse, and he and I were 14th at Burghley. So just to give you a sense that I have very much horses in my blood. I don't ride anymore, but they are very much part of my life. And that led me on eventually, having worked in the city for quite a long time, to come back to horses. And I set up a charity after having finished in the city. This must be 2008, called Ride High. And Ride High came from the fact that although I had this lovely childhood with ponies, my mother was very ill, and the way I coped was to find time with my pony. That was my solace. It was my support, it kept me going. And so many years later, having had my career in the city, I came back home and thought, I actually know there are so many children out there who are struggling with really difficult challenges that you can't see. You might be caring for a parent, you might be living in foster care, you might be living in a broken family, you might be witnessing domestic abuse. And those problems can't be seen. So I set up a charity called Ride High, which used horses to change the lives of most disadvantaged children in my area in Milton Keynes. So I went from horses, then to the city, and then came back to horses and the charity world. So I've been running a charity full on for 12 years, and I stopped doing that. I passed on to a full-time paid chief exec in January 2020, just as the pandemic started. So that's a little bit about me.
And other hobbies? I know most people who have anything to do with horses have absolutely no time for anything else. What about you?
I play a lot of tennis and I walk my dogs. I have 2 rescue dogs who I adore, and they are incredibly affectionate at home and rather more challenging out, but we love them. And yeah, so my life is quite busy. There's plenty on, but I've been looking for something like this role for about 6 months now. So,
what attracted you to apply for this role, Rachel?
Well, I was been running Ride High full time and a management basis for 12 years, and during that 12 years we went from working with 6 children a week to 90 children a week. And during that time there's a 5-year program to acquire our own centre, which we did. It's a 37-acre centre that we lease on a long-term basis, and we had to raise all the money for that, and so I took the organisation from being an idea in my head to being a fully blown social enterprise. And I absolutely loved it, but I got to the stage where I thought I really want to move out of day-to-day management. I learned so much about charities and about volunteering that I really wanted to move into a more leadership role, preferably in an area that I knew something about. It had to be a cause that I was passionate about, but I wanted to be able to affect a much wider number of people if I could. And most importantly, I wanted a position which wasn't just desk-based. I didn't just want to be running a board from behind a table. I wanted to be out and about in an organisation and really being part of the lifeblood of it. And when I looked at this role, I got the sense that the RDA probably was looking for a chair who wanted to be out with the groups and understanding the challenges and understanding the excitement of the achievements you get when you have someone on a pony and you make a breakthrough, or you see someone leaving and they're happy. I wanted to be very much involved. And so this job seemed to hit all those buttons.
And presumably you are aware, I'm sure, of the work that goes on within RDA as an organisation. I mean, it's not just riding. There's vaulting, carriage driving. We brought in endurance. Somebody once even suggested that we might at some point start playing polo, but I haven't heard any more about that one. I think, you know, to be able to get out and about and meet the groups is an important part of this role. Have you been involved with any groups locally to where you live?
Well, unfortunately, since 2020, we've been living through a pandemic and a lockdown. And so since being aware of this role, I haven't actually been out to a group. However, I have spent quite a bit of time on the phone to people running groups, because I thought, well, if I can't get out there, let me have a chat with a few people. So what has been so fascinating is to talk to, I think I probably talked to 6 people who've been running groups. And what's been absolutely clear is that every group is different. Really uniquely different. And that seems to me that is a great strength of the organisation, because it caters for so many different people. And I'm sure that every group has a unique personality because of the people who work there. Not only the paid members of staff, but crucially the volunteers.
Can you see volunteering being a challenge as we emerge from the pandemic? Because I think people have had to look at how they conduct their lives. Some people have lost their jobs and may be willing to come and volunteer. Can you see that we're going to have a problem recruiting volunteers over the next few years?
Well, strangely, I'm actually quite optimistic about volunteering, because I think what this pandemic has given us in some sense, and people who haven't been aware of it before, a real sense of community. You've seen people come together and really want to support. And from my own position, I have been involved in helping to recruit volunteers, not only for Ride High, but also for another organisation, another charity, and been inundated with requests and interest. So I'm actually quite optimistic. I think there are ways of going about recruiting volunteers. I'm sure that the RDA gets lots of requests for volunteering for people who want to lead ponies, but perhaps fewer requests for people who want to do some of the admin and the logistics. But I also think we can ask in a different way and find people who are perhaps wouldn't have thought of themselves as volunteers for the RDA. But I think they're out there and there's a great willingness to start doing more.
Yes, I think you're right. I think we've had some very good publicity, particularly over the last year and a half since our 50th anniversary. We've had some really good publicity, and people are beginning to pick up on us. And certainly feedback that I've been getting is a lot of groups have had a lot of interest since the end of this last lockdown. A lot of people have, a lot of groups have got waiting lists, which they haven't had for a while. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out over the next couple of years. Is there anything that surprised you in your conversations with the groups that you have that you weren't aware of within RDA?
Well, I would say not exactly surprised, but I would say that I've been absolutely struck by the passion that people have for the work they do, because I know that running an equestrian centre of any sort is challenging. It's not easy, and things come up out of left field that you weren't expecting. And what is so heartwarming is that everyone I've spoken to, and that not just actually people who are running centres, but people in head office, are passionate about the RDA. And that is so important, because whatever the future brings, for me as chair, whatever we do, whether we grow and what routes we take, it's absolutely essential that in 3 and 5 and 10 years' time, the RDA we recognise today is the RDA we still have there in terms of culture and values, and that passion that people have runs through the organisation in the same way it does today. So I wouldn't say it's exactly a surprise, but it's very heartwarming, and I love that. And as I say, the fact that groups are so different, that was a surprise to me.
Yeah, and they vary from region to region, county to county. It's fascinating, I find, going around the group. So I love what I do as regional chair, going out and about to the groups. And you pick up something whenever you go to another group. It's always something you come away with thinking, oh, I should do it like that in my group. And our biggest challenges, do you think? I know we've sort of touched on coming out of the pandemic, but looking to the future, do you think we're going to continue to get the support? I know we've had really good support over the last couple of years, but do you think that's going to continue?
I do, because I think the demand for our services has been heightened by the pandemic. Not only I think people have struggled and need more help, but I think people have been aware that they need more help. So people with mental health issues. I think there's also been a spotlight on the fact that some sections of our society have been left behind by the pandemic. And I think people with disabilities have been disproportionately negatively affected by the pandemic. So I think awareness is very high at the moment that we need to provide extra support in the areas of mental health and access to sport and activity, I think, and stopping people being isolated. And we know, not only for our participants, but our volunteers, getting people back in, reducing loneliness and isolation is absolutely crucial. And I think that is very high on everyone's agenda, and that is filtering through to government, to local government. I think the challenges are ones of capacity. So I think some groups have waiting lists. Some groups are saying, well, we've got waiting lists, but we're so full. And then we've got an issue with funding. So some groups are saying, yes, well, I'd love to do more, but how will I fund it? You know, my other work is already subsidising the disability riding and driving. How will we manage to do more? And one of the things I'd like to look at is how we get more funding flowing into the organisation, not just at head office, but actually across the regions and into the groups. I think really putting a focus on that is important. And one of my ideas is if we can really look at demonstrating the impact we have. So we're not just seen as a lovely activity, but we can show what we all know we do, which is transform lives. If we can really show that, I think there's a huge opportunity to get funding streams coming our way. And then it's back to volunteers, I think, making sure that we have a good flow of volunteers of all ages as well, and all denominations. I think that would really benefit the organisation.
Do you think we can improve on how we showcase what we do?
I think we probably can. I'm a great believer in when we say impact and outcomes, it sounds sort of rather formal. But actually, if we can demonstrate through really immediate means like videos, the impact we've had on someone's life, then I think those are the most powerful things we can do. We also have to have those figures. I think actually saying, we have a few of the figures about impact on our website, but I think we can do more with that and show the movement of someone, you know, someone who started being completely isolated and stuck at home to actually having a positive outlook. We need to be able to showcase more of that and show that, as I say, the RDA, I love the fact that the RDA, the RDA has cake, and that's brilliant. And it is that is part of the culture of the RDA. It's welcoming and it is warm. But at the same time, we have to make sure that people recognise that we really do change people's lives for the better.
How do you think we can do that? Do we get the participants more involved with singing our praises?
Absolutely. I think the participants are absolutely key to this. So case studies, bringing it alive, you can have any amount of data, but bringing it alive is really important. But actually the data is really important, because we can use case studies, but if we want to get local government, let's say we want local government to say, right, we're sending all of this money on disability support. How there might be a better way of spending that money if we channel some of it through to the RDA. And local government, for instance, will need data and outcomes and more quite gritty research. So I think we need to do both. We need to move the public in terms of video logs and case studies, and then we need to have the gritty research that shows people's progression from feeling one thing to feeling much more optimistic, positive and active.
And in your time as our future chair, what do you hope to achieve? What's your ambitions for us?
I think, as far as I can tell, that everyone involved in the RDA loves the work we do and changing lives. And I think probably they would say, if we could, we'd love to do more. You know, there are challenges to that, but broadly we want to help more people. And I would like to do that. That's where, if we can, we already have a hugely beneficial organisation, an effective organisation, and how can we provide the sort of benefit that we do to more people. Now, we have to do that whilst, as I said before, keeping the values and culture of this organisation that we love. We need to, if we are going to grow, we need to hold on to our strong core principles. So what does that mean in terms of, we need to look at capacity issues. Where is the capacity? How could we work with more people? Are we always going to have people on horses, or are we going to have some groundwork sessions? I know that people have been hugely creative through this pandemic in the groups about saying, well, could we do it differently? You know, I was hearing over lunch about someone working with, a group working with Shetland ponies and long reining Shetland ponies, and then the tea with a pony idea. Now, yes, they are ideas that came up through the pandemic, but I'm sure that the people engaged in those had the most brilliant time, and many of those don't necessarily need to get on a horse. So I think there are options for us where we could look at expanding, and yet I think there will still be some capacity issues. I believe we need more horses throughout our network, for instance. We might have waiting lists in one area and no waiting lists in another area. So looking at those sort of issues. And then again, coming back to funding, I want to see if I can lead us into a place where we have more funding coming in throughout the network, and more reliable funding. And maybe that will come through sort of local and national government, for instance.
Can you see that as a problem, as the funding side of it from local and national government, particularly as I can imagine the coffers are pretty empty after the pandemic?
I think they are empty, but I think we are working in an area which will be prioritised. I think mental health is so high on the agenda, and people who are isolated and disenfranchised, they are very high on the agenda. Being brutally honest, that the government knows that costs them money, and so they have to, it's a matter of diverting resources to use money in the most effective way. And it's our job, I think, to get out and demonstrate that we are the best use of that money. So I'm reasonably optimistic about that. And I know that people are stuck at the end of this, well, we hope at the end of this pandemic. And it can be disheartening and a little bit flattening. You think, gosh, how are we going to do it? But I suppose I feel optimistic about the future. I can see that we're coming to the end of this pandemic. I think people have been very creative throughout the groups about alternatives, about keeping people engaged. And so I have a huge faith in the groups, the staff and the volunteers, that we will come out of this actually stronger than we went in. So no, I'm actually quite optimistic about being able to get more funding over the, it's not going to happen immediately, but I think we need plans to make that happen.
And you mentioned at the beginning about your riding career, and that you've actually, I think you've said you've stopped riding now. But obviously, I imagine nobody ever falls out of love with horses unless they have a really nasty accident. But are you going to keep that interest by doing something else?
Well, yes. And I mean, the reason I don't ride anymore is not because I don't want to ride. I'm very fit and healthy now, but I had a very bad accident and broke my neck and my back about 5 years ago. And my husband nursed me through that. And it really was. I pretty much lost the use of my arms for a while because I had a huge operation. And two things I would say about that. Firstly, it gave me just a very small snapshot in what it was like to have a disability, because I suddenly was completely dependent on someone else. So that was very instructive for me. And also my husband, I think, thought, because I was on so many drugs, and I'd got a brain injury as well. And I think he was so frightened by the whole experience. And he just said, I'd just rather you didn't ride again. And I really respect that. It was almost easier for me than him. And so I have hung up my riding boots, but I'm really keen to learn to carriage drive. So that's my next challenge.
And it will be a challenge. I had a go at it and trying to get my head around how the harness works. When you're used to tacking up a pony or a horse, it is quite challenging. Everything's done so precisely. You'll have to, you really have to have your wits about you when you're watching the harnessing sessions. I think, I hope you will enjoy your time with RDA. It is, as you have quite rightly said, a fantastic organisation, and it's changed. I've been involved for 24, 25 years now, and it's changed out of all recognition. And I'm sure it will go on developing and changing as in the years to come, as we discover more need for the service that we provide.
I suppose I would round off by saying that I am so very much looking forward to coming out to see some of the groups in action. That's what I need to do now. I need to understand this organisation through and through, really get an understanding of the lifeblood of it. So I'm looking forward to meeting people. There are a lot of groups out there, but I'm going to do my best in the next in the next 6 months to get out as much as I can. I'm hoping to spend perhaps a couple of days a week with the RDA, and I'm already enjoying learning about it.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting chat with you, and I wish you well. And I have to say, nobody's more relieved than me to be handing over the chair to you.
Well, I feel very much up for the challenge. I really am pleased and excited about it.
Rachel, we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.